Now, that dip is more dangerous than I think we realize. So if you look at some of the research on afternoons, what you see here is it's pretty remarkable. Standardized test scores for kids, lower in the afternoon than in the morning. Math grades, lower in the afternoon if they take math in the afternoon than if they take them in the morning. Anesthesia errors, 3 times more likely at 3 p.m. than at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Fewer polyps detected in colonoscopies. Incredible deterioration in hand washing in hospitals. So basically, don't go to the hospital in the afternoon, for real. I mean, don't do that. I'm Daniel Pink, author of When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, and you're watching Behind the Brand with Bryan Elliott.
When is the best time to have an interview with someone who's notable, famous, and influencer?
Well, I was thinking about that as I was coming over, because having an interview with someone who is notable, famous, and an influencer. And, it's a great question to ask, and it's actually the heart of this latest batch of research that I've done, which is that we don't ask that question. We focus very strongly on what we're going to do, who we're going to do it with, how we're going to do it. But when it comes to the question of when we're going to do things, we don't really take it that seriously, and we ought to, because there's a very, very rich body of science telling us that there are better ways to make our when decisions in our life. We can get more productive, more creative, and actually feel better.
I mean, I've always thought it and experienced it. Timing is everything. Tell us a couple of these fun stories from the book, because there's a lot of great anecdotes leading up to some of the hacks.
The main idea in the book is that we make our decisions about timing based on intuition and guesswork. That's what I always did. I always made these kinds of decisions in a very sloppy, haphazard way. That's the wrong way to make them. And it turns out there is this incredible body of science across many, many disciplines giving us clues about how to make these decisions better, smarter, and shrewder. And this is true at the unit of a day. So the data and the evidence tell us that we can reconfigure our schedule to be maximally productive and creative in the course of a day. There's some great research on breaks. We should be taking more of them. And then if we widen the lens a little bit, we can talk about the episodic nature of our lives. Beginnings, midpoints, endings, all of these exert an influence on our behavior. And if we're aware of them, we can work smarter and live better.
Can you talk a little bit about, early riser, late riser, and how that plays into how we can be more efficient in our lives?
One thing that we know very clearly is that in the unit of a day, our cognitive abilities don't stay the same throughout the day. That's really important. First step is to figure out your type, as you just asked. Then we have to figure out what kind of task are you doing. Is it an analytic task requiring heads down focus and attention, or is it a more creative task where you want to be a little bit looser? And once we do all those things, we can do the right work at the right time, and here's how it works. We should be doing our analytic work during the peak. That's when we are most vigilant. We can bat away distractions, we can lock down, we can focus. For most of us, that peak is the morning. For owls, it's much later in the day. But during our peak, we're most vigilant. That's when we should be doing our analytic work, writing a report, analyzing data, crunching numbers, things that require intense focus. During the trough, right, that's for almost all of us, the early to mid-afternoon. That's not a very good time, as you know from the book, for anything. A lot of bad stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole candy campaign, Snickers campaign built around that sort of common knowledge that right around 2, 3, 4 o'clock, we hit that dip.
Typically, we hit a dip around 7 hours after we wake up. So, so for someone like me, you're exactly right. I wake up at 7, I'm going to hit a dip at around 2. The most dangerous time to be on the road is between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. The second most dangerous time, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Maybe because people are eating Snickers and not focused on the road.
Yeah.
And so during this trough, it's not a good time for us. We should be doing our administrative work. We should be answering our routine emails, filling out our stupid reports and things like that. Then, the recovery period, which for most of us, 80% of us, is the late afternoon and early evening, around the time that you and I are gathering here in Los Angeles. What we know about that time of day is the following. Our mood goes back up, but we're less vigilant than we are during the peak. Now that turns out to be an interesting combination. When you have higher mood and less vigilance, that makes it a good time for things like brainstorming, for solving what are called insight problems, for things that require some looseness. And it's basically, if you look at the research, and going back to my initial question and frustration, the design principles are in the science. Do your analytic work during the peak, whenever that may be, do your administrative work during the trough, and do your insight, creative, iterative work in the recovery. And it's really that simple. The problem is, of course, is that we don't do that. What we know from the research is the importance of breaks. We should be taking more breaks, and we should be taking certain kinds of breaks.
Yeah, I love you wrote about scheduling breaks. You know,
Absolutely.
Literally put it in your phone.
Absolutely
like
right.
Time to stand up, move around.
Exactly.
Even take a nap.
Well, there's a lot of good research on the benefits of naps, but on breaks in general, what we know is this: we should be taking more breaks. We should be taking certain kinds of breaks. This idea that we have out there in certain workplace cultures that you should power through, that the way to get more done is to power through, not to take a break. We don't take these questions of when seriously enough.
Yeah.
So you know, the folks who are watching your show, my guess is that on the day that they're watching this, 90% of them have a to-do list, right? Right. So what does that mean? That means that they're intentional. That's a sign of intentionality. They're intentional about. They're literally enumerating what they're going to do. They're intentional about how they're going to do it, who they're going to do it with. They're not intentional about when. They just say, okay, whatever. I'll just, you know, it doesn't really matter when I have this meeting, when I do this kind of work, when I do that kind of work, as long as I do it.
Let's go back to a sales question, because I know you've studied a lot about sales as well. You know, probably a lot of people who are watching this too are marketers, and they're trying to either send an email or they have an ad going.
Yep.
What is the ideal time to reach that decision maker? Let's say that she's in the C-suite and you know, you want to call or send something.
When people make decisions, they come into the encounter with a default decision, and that default decision is usually no. So you're going to ask, I mean, oh, it is. Yeah. So you're trying to sell somebody something, and their default answer, no, I'm not going to buy that.
Yeah.
You ask your boss for a raise, no. All right. So the default answer is no. So the question then becomes, are there different times of day, different situations, different temporal moments when people are more likely to overcome the default? And the answer turns out to be yes. It seems like earlier in the day and immediately after breaks.
See, this is where it gets interesting for me.
People are more likely to overcome the default. Now, what does that mean? I don't want to oversell this, because what we're talking about here are probabilities. So let's say you're selling something to the C-suite, a C-suite prospect, and you have a meeting, earlier in the day rather than later in the day. So let's say that, later in the day, let's say you have a 7% chance of succeeding. All right, and let's say that if you do it at the right time, you can dial that up to a 11% chance. Okay, if you have 11% chance, and this is advanced math for us, you have an 89% chance of failing. All right, it's still not likely to work.
Yeah.
But I will take 11% over 7%, especially when I'm doing it again and again and again and again and again. Eventually, the law of large numbers will work to my advantage. So all we're doing here is we're trying to twist the dial a little bit more in our favor.
Well, and again, to zoom out a little bit, it's about being more strategic about timing.
Right, absolutely.
It's brilliant.